We just got back from an action-packed 4 days in San Francisco, where I spent most of my time covering Dreamforce, which is Salesforce's annual user conference. It's become a festival for all things tech and AI. That's why I did the show direct from Dreamforce on Tuesday. And we heard a lot from Salesforce CEO Marc Benioff about the success of Agentforce. That's their AI platform that uses digital agents to more or less replace humans. But on Wednesday night after the market closed, we got some very big news from Salesforce itself. See, every year on the sidelines of this conference, the company holds an investor day and an analyst session where they talk numbers, give you an outlook. And this time, whoa, the stakes were so high. Remember, Salesforce, this stock has been a real dog this year, like virtually every other enterprise software play, though. Going into that analyst meeting, it was down 29% year to date. That's highly unusual for me to remember that stock be that bad. And it is a holding of our charitable trust. The entire enterprise software industry is under pressure from the somewhat nebulous threat of generative AI platforms, which have proven to be quite adept at writing code, to the point where potential clients may just make their own software using AI instead of using, say, Salesforce. Now, if AI leads to layoffs, that hurts Salesforce, too, because they typically charge based on the number of users at a given organization. It's called the seat model. But at a more basic level, Wall Street's simply not sold on the idea that Salesforce's AI business, Agentforce, is truly working. Salesforce rolled out Agentforce late last summer and in fairly short order put the whole weight of the company behind it. I can speak with Marc Benioff fairly often, and for over a year now, always wanted to talk about is Agentforce, even though it was clear from the analyst meeting that it wasn't really ready for prime time. In the meantime, though, we haven't seen a meaningful pickup in Salesforce's revenue growth from Agentforce. Don't get me wrong. The company's reported some very solid quarters. It's not like the business is doing badly. But they're spending a lot on this Agentix platform, and so far we just don't know if it's going to pay off. Keep in mind, Salesforce has been one of the great growth stories of the past 20 years. In 2005, they did about $300 million in revenue. This year, they're on track to do north of $41 billion in revenue. That's amazing. Yet for the past 5 quarters, Salesforce's stock has been stuck with it, and that's because the company has a revenue growth rate in the high single digits. Not terrible, but definitely not what Wall Street hopes for from this kind of growth company. Some of us have been questioning if Salesforce is still a growth company. So considering all the enthusiasm about Agentforce from Benioff and his team, I've been hoping to see that growth rate move higher. And it simply hasn't. It's been stuck in that 8-9% range for the past 5 quarters. And that's why the stock has done, well, you can see that, huh? Nothing. And that bothers me tremendously. Sorry. But that brings us to the Salesforce investor and analyst event on Wednesday night. The session began with a deep dive into Agentforce, but rather than focusing on how it can help customers, management went into detail on how the company has become adept at pushing Agentforce to the point where it's bringing more business for Salesforce overall. And it gave us these really convincing examples. A consumer goods company that grew its spend by 50% after adopting Agentforce. A consumer electronics company that quadrupled its spending with Salesforce after embracing Agentforce. In other words, they weren't cutting back on spending. They were giving them more money. More importantly, management rolled out some new long-term guidance, which was very reassuring to investors. The headline was a new revenue target for 2030 fiscal year, more than $60 billion, which was huge. Why? 2 reasons. First, the 2030 revenue target was better than expected. Going into the meeting, the analysts were expecting $58.4 billion in revenue for the 2030 fiscal year, which is more like the 2029 calendar year. So that's meaningfully higher than expected. Second, and perhaps more importantly, Salesforce's $60 billion target implies that the revenue will rise at a compound annual growth rate of 10% over the next 4 years or so. Again, Wall Street's been frustrated because the company's revenue has been stuck in the high single digits. But now Salesforce is implying that their growth will reaccelerate to the low double digits for an extended period of time. Maybe also that could be an under-promise, over-deliver situation. It's a huge development. And it's why the stock jumped 4% on Thursday. At one point, it's up about 5% for its single best day gain since May. Didn't hurt that Salesforce also committed to buying back $7 billion worth of stock. That's roughly 3% of the shares outstanding over the next 6 months. Management also said they expect to be a Rule of 50 company by fiscal 2030, meaning the revenue growth plus their operating margin would add up to more than 50 and that it's the higher quality version of the rule of 40 that we often talk about when it comes to enterprise software stock. Now, look, this would be a huge feat to pull off, and I think it will be. So we are sticking with the stock, which you can learn more about in reading my weekend bulletin that I put out Sunday night just for subscribers to, yes, our investing club. Now, of course, this isn't actual evidence of Salesforce making a comeback. As the great Frank Slootman, formerly of ServiceNow and Snowflake, once said on this show, the guidance is the guidance. It's more of a sign of management's confidence in the future. Not everybody shares that confidence. Almost immediately after the fiscal 2030 revenue targets was issued, we heard from the skeptics, the bears, the people who really are trying to control the stock, impact players like D.A. Davis's analyst Gil Loria, who called the target, quote, aspirational, end quote, and said, quote, we are not ready to underwrite a reacceleration to a 10% plus organic growth CAGR, compound annual growth rate through 2030, end quote. Oh, in other words, he thinks that these companies are making it up, I felt. The onus is now, or dreamers, the onus is now on Benioff and Salesforce to deliver against this lofty revenue projection, and the proof will be in the proverbial pudding. Still, for me, the mere announcement of this ambitious revenue target felt like a turning point for Salesforce. As an extremely frustrated long-term shareholder in this one, it was very encouraging to finally get a break from what's felt like a constant drumbeat of negativity this year, at least from the analysts. Bottom line, after spending the week in San Francisco, much of that time at Dreamforce, I'm feeling a lot more sanguine about Salesforce's stock than I was last Friday. That said, if you want to own Salesforce, you need to have faith in Mark Benioff's ability to deliver on the long-term targets. Given his track record, his long-term track record, call me a believer, which is why we still own this one for the Charitable Trust. At the same time, patience is needed. Even though Salesforce's new long-term guidance was positive, the enterprise software group is so hated, I don't know if anyone on Wall Street will even care, at least for the moment. I don't know if the stock can snap back anytime soon. I'm simply betting that it'll be a winner over the next 12 to 18 months, which means you can't afford to trade in and out of it, because when you do that, there's a very good chance that you're out of it when we get the eventual gains. I want to take some calls, and therefore I want to go to Gary in Alabama. Gary.
Hey, Jim. First of all, I have to thank you for the invite to New York a couple of weeks ago. That was really special. It was great.
Wasn't that great? That was what we call one of the perks of being a member of the CNBC Investing Club. People should watch.
Absolutely.
It's not a static thing. I throw the world at this thing. So does Jeff Marks. You'd be nuts not to subscribe. How can I help?
I know. It's fantastic. Thank you so much for all your help.
Of course.
Well, I'm a big fan of Meta. I have bought that stock off and on over the years and have made good money with it, but it's been bouncing around a lot lately. So a two-part question. First, do you think it's a good buy at this price? And secondly, what do you think the chances are of a split in the near future?
All right, I'm going to answer the latter first by saying I have no concept whether Mark Zuckerberg wants to do a split, but he sure does want to exceed. And having a 24 multiple on next year's earnings, which I calculate, is an insult to this man to have a market multiple. I expect the stock, which is off 80 points from its high, to have a very big run here, and I urge you to stay in it. And by the way, I also thank you for the kind words about the club when we brought Jensen Huang to members of the club only. Salesforce's new revenue target feels like a turning point for the company, and I'm definitely more encouraged about their outlook now than I was before the week started. Net money ahead. What do we got? California utility PG&E could be a big player in the data center buildup, but nobody's talking about it. I'm hearing about the projects the company has in the pipeline for CEO. And investors don't seem to understand that turnarounds take time, for heaven's sake. I'm detailing the action in Starbucks and Nike and why I'm sticking by these stories for the Charitable Trust. Of course, all your calls, rapid fire, in tonight's edition of the Lightning Round. So stay with Kramer.